Mark Rober is one of the big boys of YouTube, and he currently has 21.5 million subscribers or something like that. His channel is mostly around engineering and creating cool science gadgets, but recently he made a video centered around pianos, and I am a pianist, so I thought I would react to it. The video is centered around a piece called Rush E, which I've seen a lot of pianists on YouTube try and learn. It's supposed to be one of the hardest pieces to learn. And in the video, I assume he tries to get a robot to play it. I've got to say, I haven't seen a lot of Mark Rober videos, so I don't really know what to expect. But I have the music because I can't watch a video about a piece without being able to see the piece. And let's see how we get on.
This is a talking piano and it's so cool. And his name is Chopsticks. So in addition to talking...
This is interesting because I think what's happening right now is obviously got something playing the piano. There is an old concept in like early, it must be the 1800s. There was something called a player piano or a piano roll where a piano would play itself and it would do it like, you know these little boxes that you get where it plays its own song by winding it up? It's kind of like that where it can play itself using like indentations on a piece of paper and it goes through the piano, and that's kind of what's happening here. So I wonder if that's the way he's gone about actually trying to make this work. There's also a lot of electric pianos that can now do this where the pianos are self-playing.
He can play simple songs like that, but also like really complicated songs. So today, not only will we talk about the science behind making a piano speak human, but later he's gonna play the drums for us and sing for us. Not yet, Chopsticks. Remember for my videos, that song...
It's really interesting how in this video he's kind of got the piano doing what would normally be like background music. He's trying to like, he's setting the scene by getting the piano to play the parts, which is really cool.
Song usually comes a little bit later.
What key is that in?
Anyways, then he's gonna attempt to play the world's most complicated digital piano song from sheet music boss, Rush E.
Yeah, that's basically impossible for a pianist to play. I think the actual one where there's music for it is not that insane. It's hard. I should probably actually learn this at some point.
And this song has never been played with an actual real-life piano, so I've legitimately got a couple...
It's not being played by an actual piano in the form that it is on that video, because that's really not that possible. But there are versions of people trying to learn it.
But before we get to any of that, we need to first understand the really cool engineering behind how pianos even work. Because if you look at the guts of this modified see-through piano, for something that was invented by an Italian dude 300 years ago, you can see it's pretty complicated. In fact, if you zoom in and just isolate on a single key, this is what's happening every time you push down on the white part. And if you're thinking like an engineer, you know the best design is always the one that...
He does a really good job of explaining it in a way that doesn't sound that nerdy. But yeah, so on a real piano, you can actually see it on this piano. If you play a key, the dampener that sits against the strings lifts up so that when the hammer hits it, it can obviously make the strings vibrate. But as soon as you let go, the dampener goes back down to stop the string, unless you hold the pedal. So when you have the pedal down, all the dampeners come forward and the notes just hold for ages. Until you let go of your foot, that is.
Gets the job done in the most simple way possible. And when I first saw this, no offense to Bartolome Cristofori, the inventor of the piano, it just seemed overly complicated. I mean, the first piano I ever played was pretty dang simple. Like, why can't you just have a class 1 lever where when I push down here, there's a fulcrum in the middle and it hits the string here? Well, it turns out there's 2 problems with that right off the bat. The first is that the hammer remains in contact with the string when you hold the key down. That means the string isn't free to wiggle and vibrate, which is how the sound is created. Like with this guitar, it sounds great until you touch the strings. And now because it can't vibrate, you don't hear anything. In fact, you can see that's exactly the problem with this toy piano. The second problem is this isn't up...
They always invent toy pianos like that, where you can't actually make a note. You have to literally go like that.
An upright piano, so the strings must be vertical to fit. But that's an easy enough fix if we shift them here and add an extra hinge point. However, you'll notice we're still damping the string. And as you can see, the piano should continue making sound even if I'm holding the key down. So how do...
That is only if you're holding the key down. As soon as you lift the key back up, then the dampener goes back on, the hammer stops it ringing.
So how do we do that? Well, Bartolomeo got real clever and added a little extra hardware here. So now when you press the key, this jack flings the hammer forward so it hits the string, but then the jack gets its foot caught, which moves it out of the way so the hammer can move back and not dampen the string. Fun fact, most people think pianos are considered string instruments, but this hammer-like action is why they're actually classified as percussion.
Kind of agree and disagree there. So I think piano can be classified, I think it can be classified as a string instrument and a percussion instrument and a keyboard instrument. Keyboard instruments also have their own category. So it's one of those weird instruments where it's kind of more than one thing because it's being played by doing more than one thing.
So now if I press the key down, it will continue to make noise. But wait, if I let my finger go, the sound should stop. So something is damping that string. But if you look in our current build, you can see if I let the key go, there's nothing to stop the string from just continuing to vibrate and make sound. To solve this, Bartolomeo added an extra pivot point and some more hardware. So now you see this damper rests on the string and keeps it quiet until you press the key down. Then the hammer strikes, then it's free to vibrate and create noise all the way up to the moment the key is released. And finally, if I want to play a note really quickly and repeatedly like this, I need the hammer to be close to the string and not way back here like this. So by adding this backstop, it keeps the hammer close after each hit in case I need to quickly hit it again. So there you go.
That's up to a point. It is actually really hard to play repeated notes, which is exactly what's required for Rush E, but it's really hard to play repeated notes, and a good technique for this, if you're trying to do this as a pianist, is use multiple fingers on the same key, because if you try and use one finger, you're not only limited by the piano, but by your actual hand, which can't... You can only play it so fast, but if you use multiple fingers, you can kind of glide over them. Really hard technique to master, but it actually does mean that you can go pretty fast, and there's a few different pieces and songs that use that in it.
Bartolomeo, it turns out it's only as complicated as it needs to be, and no more. It's also sort of simplistically beautiful that all that functionality is from only one input every time you press a single key. Now Chopsticks here is a special case, not only because he's see-through, but because he can play himself. And it is true, pianos that play themselves have been around for over 100 years, but there's an important difference here. An old player piano...
Yeah, so this is exactly what I was talking about. Player pianos, where they use a piano roll or there's some functionality inside that enable it to play itself.
Piano works by scrolling through a paper sheet like this, and when it encounters a hole, it passes air through, which plays the key. So all the keys are played at full force, and the timing isn't very precise. Whereas Chopsticks here is a modern version that uses a solenoid to actuate the key. We place the solenoids right here, so when the rod extends, it's no different than someone actually pressing the key. You can see them all lined up along here.
That's really interesting, and I don't know whether that's the same for all modern type pianos that play themselves, but I didn't know that, where it's actually physically playing the key. The problem is, I wonder whether it can change velocity. When you're using your fingers, you can press the key with a certain, like, you can press the key with different actions, which means that you get a different quality of sound with the notes, depending on the speed that you press the key, and also how hard you press it. I wonder if that can do the same if it's been sort of mechanically driven, or whether you are just kind of stuck playing them at certain velocities.
But with solenoids, not only do you get your timing down to fractions of a second, but you have 127 different levels of increasing force to press a piano key, which means you can make perfect recreations of a human player.
That is interesting, because obviously he's answered my question there, but I wonder whether the action can be different, because it's not all about how hard you press the key, it's about the speed at which you press the key as well to get a different sound. So if I wanted to play something where it was very hard action, it has a very hard sound, you play the keys very fast, whereas if I wanted to play the same thing still loud, but a softer action, that has a very different quality of sound just based on the speed that the key is pressed down, not just about how hard it's pressed.
So here's my friend Andrew from the YouTube channel Sheet Music Boss playing a simple sea shanty and then recording it as a MIDI, and then Chopsticks uses that MIDI to play it back perfectly. Only since he's not limited to a mere 10 human fingers, the songs can get more complex.
Also interesting, when you use MIDI, I think it's 127.
You have 127.
Don't quote me on that, but I think there's only 127 different steps of velocity that you can pick. Once again, it's very much not as nuanced as a human playing the piano. I don't want to be out of a job. I think it's very difficult to replicate a human playing the piano.
But he can do even better than that, because those 88 precision solenoids allow him to make crude reproductions of entire bands. See if you can pick out the singer's actual voice in this classical piece of music history.
Thought I'd have a go. Definitely think my version was better.
And so now that we know at least partially what he's capable of, before we attempt Rush E, let's quickly discuss how we actually make Chopsticks speak and sing. Chopsticks. That's better. And to do that, I'm going to pass it over to my buddy Grant from the YouTube channel 3 Blue 1 Brown for a simple explanation.
The signals from speech can be visualized with a waveform, which you might think of as telling you the air pressure next to a microphone as a function of time. If you zoom in on a little window of it, you might notice it looks like a rhythmic repeating pattern. As it happens, one of the most delightful facts from math tells us that for pretty much any signal, you can express it as a sum of pure sine waves, which in the context of sounds correspond to pure pitches.
Yeah, so I think they're referring to the harmonic series. So whenever you play a single note, you don't just get that note, you get lots of notes above it, which are all pure sounds, but layered on top of each other to create a unique sound. That's why a guitar sounds different to a piano, because they have different qualities of tone, and they can all be built up of unique tones. It's all about which harmonics, or which higher pitch frequencies in a note are brought out.
Each with a different height. Now, a favorite tool in signal processing is something called a Fourier transform, which you can think of as telling you the heights of each one of these sine waves as a function of the frequency you're dealing with. So for a piano project, if you take this Fourier transform and you just consider the peaks, it's a way of giving you the most important notes to be played to recreate the sound. If you add just a handful of these dominant frequencies, you'll get a signal which is almost but not quite the original signal.
So I think what they're doing is they're listening to something and they're taking the frequencies that they can hear within that sound wave and then replicating it across frequencies on a piano, which I don't think is a direct representation, probably why Rick Astley sounds terrible on the piano there.
And with what level of intensity. And if you do it right, you can get something that sounds like this.
Hey Chopsticks, repeat after me. Now I do have to come clean and admit that I am cheating a little bit by putting the words Chopsticks is speaking up on the screen. As humans, 80% of the information our brains gather about our surroundings comes from our sense of sight. And so as our dominant sense, our brain really leans on our eyes even when processing what we hear.
I think that's to do with multiple senses. I think we rely on our eyes because it's another way of backing up the information that we're already given.
Now for the big finale. In a world's first exclusive, I present an actual piano attempting to play the world's hardest piano song, Rush E.
Okay, I definitely have to have a go. If I actually wanted to play that, definitely have to practice it. So I'm kind of jealous that this can just do it. You'd have to have at least 3 people or 30 fingers to be able to play that. I think I could probably do that. It's clearly an exercise in trying to get something to sound impossible. It's super interesting. I don't think he's done anything groundbreaking because it's just Roshi played essentially on a modern player piano where it's not just based on piano roll. It'd be interesting to see if that could be played on piano roll. But let me know what you think in the comments. If you like these kind of videos where I react to these kind of things, then consider subscribing and let me know what I should react to next in the comments. Another modern phenomena, excellent segue, is what TikTok is doing to the music industry. And if you are interested in that, head on through to this video and I will see you there.